Okay, hello everyone. We're recording this and everyone has agreed to be recorded. So welcome, I'm Edwin Rutsch, Director of the Center for Building a Culture of Empathy. And this is the beginning of a series of empathy circles that we want to hold to bridge the partisan divide, the social and political divides in the country. Hi everybody. That means what we're trying to do is really build the culture of empathy, which is for everyone to feel heard, seen, and acknowledged, as well as to foster constructive dialogue and see our common humanity. And the idea is that to foster these empathy circles and eventually hold hundreds, if not thousands, of these and train facilitators to facilitate, and everyone here can become a facilitator. And the one idea is to actually take these to Congress, so we have the congressional representatives hold empathy circles with each other. So we're sort of, kind of planning, working towards that. So hopefully we can all occupy the Capitol Mall and demand that the representatives dialogue with each other. Also as viewers, people who are watching this, since we're recording and posting this, that as a viewer you can join us and you can also become a facilitator. And to get connected with us, you can go to empathytent.com or empathycircle.com. That'll get you to our website. And with that, Evan was going to give the kind of lead us, just to guide us in personal introductions and how to empathy circles. And while he's doing that, I'm going to be sorting us into groups. So take it away, Evan.
Sure. So we typically start with introductions. By the way, for the people who just joined, we are recording this and then we post it afterwards online. So just want to make sure you guys are comfortable with that. If not, here's a chance to bow out if you need to. And yeah, so we would start with introductions, your name, where you're from, and kind of how you lean politically. So I'll model that and then I'll call people out just on the order of my screen. So my name's Evan McGore. I'm from Long Island. I'm kind of bouncing around the country right now, and I kind of have been identifying as a liberal my whole life, and I still sort of see myself as a liberal, but I deeply care about everyone's needs, and that's really important to me. And I think compromise and making sure everyone's happy is really important. So with that, I'll jump to David next.
Okay. My name is David, and I live in San Francisco. And for all intents and purposes, I identify as conservative. For most of my life, I was apolitical. I didn't really care. And past couple of years, especially living in the Bay Area, it's kind of brought up my conservative side, so to speak. I think it's me getting older as well, and wanting to get involved with talking about politics and how I view stuff. So yeah, that's just where I'm at.
Okay, Judith, do you want to introduce yourself next?
Sure. My name is Judith. I live in Oakland, California, and I'm a liberal, lifelong. My real feeling is that if we don't start talking to one another in this country with compassion and with empathy, and not just scream at each other or stop talking because we can't get through, a certain line of thinking that we'll never get to a place where we can compromise or, go forward, because it just seems like we're so stuck. So that's my thought about it.
Okay, Oceana.
Oceana, what was I supposed to say? Wait, Oceana and my political?
Yeah, where you're from and how you lean politically.
Murfreesboro, Tennessee, which is about 45 minutes southeast of Nashville, because most people don't know where that is. And I don't know how to answer that because I sort of just believe what I believe, but at the same time, that seems to fall on the freedom and not telling people, you know, who they should be or where they should go to the bathroom or what they should do with their bodies, those types of things.
Cool. Sam?
Hi, I'm Sam. I'm also originally from Long Island, but I currently live in New Jersey in the Trenton area. And I generally identify as more on the left, but I would easily vote across party lines for any candidate that sees the importance of addressing the corrupting influence of money in our political system. And that's kind of like my main single issue kind of thing. So there really isn't a political party that's talking about that a lot, except maybe with the exception of Bernie Sanders. So that was why I kind of supported him. But generally, I do lean more on the left.
Cool. Tyler? You're muted in the Zoom. You gotta unmute there, Tyler.
There should be a button on your screen as well that you can use.
Yeah. Good now?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, cool. Sorry. Anyway, my name's Tyler. I live in the Bay. I live in San Francisco in the Mission District specifically. When I was a child, I had my masculinity and my heterosexuality denied me. And that caused me a lot of pain and grief recovering my masculinity. So I kind of align on the right with classic gender roles being, something that I believe in. And yeah, I think I'll just leave it at that.
Cool. Marky? Oh, you want to unmute yourself.
There we go. Let's see. My name's Marky, and I live in Vermont, although right now I'm in Florida. And I agree a lot with what Sam said. My biggest political concern is about the influence of money and specifically corporate money on what is affecting all of us, and I think it's kind of hidden. And I definitely see it really pervasive. I being from Vermont, I actually know Bernie Sanders. I've had conversations with him, and I really appreciate his integrity, and I agree with a lot of what he said, what he stands for. Appreciate the ways that he's speaking out. But I, too, would vote for anyone who I felt was standing up for the interests of real people over the money that's been trying to take over everything that we're doing. And I share Judith's concern about the lack of dialogue that's happening and the ways that dialogue has gotten so inflamed in our country. And I'm interested in doing whatever I can to change that.
Okay. Corey?
Hi, my name's Corey. I'm currently in Chico, California. I identify as radical left, but I've been felt increasingly alienated by the sort of hard lines that have been drawn by people that I share political direction with, like the like people they I worry about people being unable to the culture of using shame and consequent shame and shunning as a way of creating spaces on the left. I believe in dismantling traditional gender roles, and sorry, it's not me. And I'm invested in like the absence of big money from politics, and yeah, I really don't I'll just leave it at that.
Thanks everyone for introducing yourselves. So before we break out, we typically just go over the process. Again, sorry for the repetition for those of us who have done this already more than once. So the way that these empathy circles work is that they're a structured process where somebody will go first and they'll take the role of the speaker, and then the speaker always has to select who they want to be their listener. So the speaker selects a listener, and then the speaker will has about, usually we start with 3 or 5 minutes, and so then and somebody in the room will be keeping track of time to make sure that it's balanced. And the listener's job is just to simply reflect back what they're hearing. So if someone says, I really care about getting money out of politics, then the listener would say something like, okay, so what I'm hearing is that you care about getting the money out of politics. Or, you can paraphrase, obviously that's just a small chunk. Speaking of smaller chunks, it's actually really helpful if you can try to keep your speaking concise and in sort of small, easy to digest chunks, because that's always going to make it easier on the listener to reflect back what you're saying instead of going off on a huge long thing. So it's good to pause, here and there, and just say, let me pause there and let you reflect that before I continue. And then for the listener, it's really important just to reflect back and not put your own opinions and respond to things. So even if someone's speaking to you and they ask you a question, then the listener would just say, okay, what I'm hearing is that you want to ask about such and such. And we typically try to keep it balanced, like select somebody who hasn't gone yet, or just try to keep it balanced. But it's also great if, there's back and forth that wants to happen. So you can speak about whatever you want. You can say anything you want. And then eventually we'll break back into this room after we sort of break out into separate groups. And again, it's being recorded, and all the breakout groups will be recorded today and then posted online afterwards. Does anyone have any questions?
We should probably do an example.
Sure. David, you want to do a quick one with me?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, cool. So I would say, hey, David, will you be my listener?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. So one thing I'm feeling today is that I've been to a few empathy circles, and sometimes I don't know what to share because I've already shared so many of my opinions.
Okay, you're expressing today that you feel like you've been to plenty of empathy circles, and you feel like you don't know what else to share because you've shared so much already.
Thank you. I feel fully heard. You can select someone to be your listener now.
Okay, then I would choose someone else, and the process would repeat itself.
Cool.
You want me to do that now? I think we just go back.
I think we've modeled it enough.
We'll do it in the groups and the topic too. We have a topic today, which is what aspect of the current political situation do you feel irritated, frustrated, or angry about, and why? And but you can talk about anything that's really alive for you, have energy for, so that it's not you don't have to do the topic, whatever you have energy for. So with that, are we ready, Evan? I made the breakout groups, and we'll go into those. And there'll be 5 in one group, and you'll be facilitating one, Evan. And I gave you recording permission, so here we go.
Cool.
Okay. then we're ready to start. So our question is what aspect of the current political situation do you feel irritated, frustrated, or angry about? And whoever would like to start can select who they want to. Someone might want to choose me just so I can model it again, or whoever you want. Whoever wants to go first.
Okay, well, I guess I will.
Okay.
All right, and I guess I'll choose you, Edwin.
Okay. And I'll keep time too.
Do you need someone else to keep time, or can you do it?
I can do it. I gotta stopwatch here.
You get your nifty sign too, so
Yeah.
proud of that. All right. Yeah. As far as the topic of what angers me about the political system, I'm to the point now where I try not to let things like systems anger me, because I feel that feelings are going to help. Or is that is concerned? I don't understand about the political system. I probably could if I studied more, but I'm more focused on what's going on with our culture.
So you're not really looking at systems, the political systems. Don't have interest in that. You're really interested in the culture.
And I feel hurt. And one reason why I feel focus on culture is because I've grown up in this culture. I grew up in Alabama, like probably the most conservative part of the country, and I've spent most of my adult life in San Francisco, arguably the most liberal part of the country. So I've seen two extremes, and I think I got a decent finger on the cultural pulse, so to speak. And I think culture dictates politics and not the other way around. Politics tries to dictate culture, but I think people bring things come out of the culture, and then they use politics to achieve.
Okay, so you're seeing the importance of culture, that things, ideas, whatever comes out of the culture, and then that affects politics. So just really the importance to you of looking at the culture.
And then I was born in Alabama.
Oh, and that you're born in Alabama, a very conservative area, and then you're in San Francisco, very liberal. So you've seen kind of two different cultures, kind of extreme cultures.
Yeah, I feel hurt. I feel like the truth is somewhere in between, perhaps. And I'm not super educated, so I do not know how huge systems really work. I just assume it's the nuts and bolts of people trying to get what they want. So I think for me, what's important is what people want, and depending on what they want is going to dictate what type of systems are going to be built around that.
Mm-hmm. So the system is just like nuts and bolts, and that really the underlying desires or needs or wants of people is what's going to sort of affect the political system, kind of work its way through the political system.
Yes, I feel hurt. How am I doing on time?
2 minutes.
Okay.
Go.
I feel like if a lot of I know it's easy to say, oh, the system is corrupt or whatever. I mean, there's always corruption when there's power involved. I think that's something you should just assume that just comes from human nature. And I think a lot of problems we're facing today can be solved at a cultural ground level. You know, I mean, if you see a lot of malevolence, a lot of like distrust in our political sphere, it's probably because it's arose from our culture. And the culture is to blame, not just a few people in politics.
Oh, okay. So if there's corruption and problems in the politics, it's really a deeper issue of the culture, and that's what we have to fix is the culture.
Yeah, I feel hurt, and that's about it for me.
Okay, then you feel heard. Then I'll reset the clock here, and I'll speak to Sam.
Okay.
So David mentioned the political system, and I actually had said the political situation. So it's just how politics is. It's not the system. So for anger about the system, but as just the whole political situation. So I just wanted to have that clarity.
Yeah, so you just want to clarify that when you were saying to comment on the political situation, you didn't necessarily mean like the system of politics, but more of like what's going on politically overall in our country.
And I had posted something in our group too that it's something that I just want to kind of get off my chest. It's kind of an irritation is that, and it's not really the current political, but it's when Barack Obama, ran for office, that he said, oh, we have an empathy deficit in the country, and I'm the one that can solve this problem, this empathy deficit. And I feel that it wasn't really addressed and solved. And I just feel kind of like real irritation about that. There was sort of this, I think the whole political mess that we have now is kind of sort of a failure that happened, from Obama, not really addressing the empathy deficit.
Yeah, so you're just feeling really frustrated and almost kind of let down by Obama in a way when he said, oh, we have an empathy deficit, and it seemed there was a lot of hope that he might address that, but you're seeing that hasn't really happened.
Yeah, and it's also, I feel irritation and, sometimes I get kind of a bit angry about it because I really threw myself into it, said, hey, I want to do something about this. I really, I've invested a lot of time and, resources, and it was like, hey, where'd this go? It's like, he didn't really, kind of follow through at a nuts and bolts sort of a level.
Yeah, so you really threw your whole self into that, behind that one kind of idea that he said about the empathy deficit. But then he didn't deliver on that, and it just is so irritating to have put all that into it and, not gotten anything from it.
And it was one of the things was the conservatives attacked him for it in the Senate, especially when he said he was going to choose a Supreme Court justice that had empathy as one of the qualities. And the Democrats and he didn't really address the concerns of the conservatives. They didn't clearly define empathy. They didn't model it. They didn't insist on empathy circles, or something with that. So it just was a big mess. And I just feel, really pretty irritated about it.
Yeah. So he was going to use empathy as a criteria for Supreme Court justice, but then it all got kind of lost, and the conservatives were very, there was a lot of, infighting about that. And then there wasn't a lot of listening to the conservatives' concerns and really more clearly defining what empathy is and how can we come together about that idea. And it just didn't really happen.
Right. And so what I'm hoping is with these empathy circles, we can take it to Congress and actually insist on the congressional representatives having empathy circles with each other. And I've already talked with my Congressman, Mark DeSaulnier, and working on him we actually had a meeting with him. So we're trying to, try to get that to happen.
Yeah, so you're kind of taking it into your own hands now to bring the empathy circle into Congress and into government the way you had envisioned and hoped Obama would.
Yeah, and I have understand that he didn't do it, because he didn't have maybe some of the tools and so forth. So there's kind of that aspect. The other part is that before this meeting, before this circle, David and Markey had been talking, posting to each other about the Kavanaugh-Ford issue. So that's why I brought them together here in this group. So maybe we can have a follow-up on that, because I think there's a lot to talk about in terms of how that could have been done in an empathy circle instead of just kind of this trial, sort of a trial or whatever, this hearing was mess.
Yeah, so you just noticed that David and Markey had an online conversation about the Kavanaugh situation, and you purposely put them together in the circle in the hopes that, maybe that dialogue could be continued in this format. And then you also just wanted to acknowledge that Obama was missing some of these tools perhaps, and that's why that didn't go anywhere.
Yep, I feel heard, and that was my time. Thanks.
Cool. Um, there's a couple of things. I mean, one is
You
again,
need to select person. to
oh,
speak
right.
to. That one.
I'll choose Marky. So I am feeling really frustrated about how one thing that really frustrates me is this talk of, you know, on both the conservative and liberal sides, it's like all about, oh, our side winning. Like we just have to keep our power or stay in control, and no attention is really paid to the actual issues and concerns affecting our country. I feel like it's more of just a political game rather than addressing like the real issues.
So you're feeling really frustrated about the power struggle aspect, where it feels like they're not paying attention to what the real issues are, but it's all about the winning and losing, who's winning and who's losing.
Yeah, and I just feel like there's a lot of distraction going on from what I feel is the real issue, being that there's an extraordinary amount of control that special interests have in our government, and I feel like that gets lost whenever I've spoken with, you know, some of my conservative friends. There's this idea that, you know, well, government is the problem, but then I feel like, well, it's not necessarily that government's inherently like flawed, but like the way it's been kind of corrupted. And I feel like there's ways to address that using government and using regulations and laws to kind of rein some of that in.
So you're feeling a little frustrated about the ways that some conservatives blame government, and you feel that government might have a role in addressing, or one might be able to use government to address this special interest hyper influence, which is not being addressed.
Yeah. And what frightens me a lot about now specifically, and I would agree with David that a lot of this is like culturally based, and there's a lot of things we have to address at the cultural level and how we think and believe. But I'm really concerned about what a lot of things that seem like it's just a breakdown of the democratic process, and then the systems, and the attacks on media, but then media being used to also create havoc too. I'll stop there for a second.
Okay, so first you were saying that you agree with David when he was talking about how a lot of this arises out of culture, and that is an important influence. And now I'm forgetting the rest of it. It seemed like, yeah, I don't remember.
Yeah,
what
I kind of threw a lot at you. Just that one aspect of that system breakdown is the attack on the media, because the media plays an important role on like checking this as a checks and balance, but then the media can also play a detrimental role as well.
So you're aware that the media, similar to government, the media could have a potential of influencing it in a positive way, and yet you see some of the ways that the media actually contributes to things breaking down.
Right. And just other attacks on just the government systems, like breakdowns of trust. You know, I don't like how the current president is trying to discredit like these major institutions like the FBI and just other things. Like I feel like he's kind of trying to make it more of an autocracy rather than a democracy, and that just really concerns me.
So you're really concerned about some of the attacks coming from the president on some of the institutions like the FBI, and I suspect maybe the media too, because you had mentioned that before. So you're concerned, really concerned about some of the ways that this stuff is breaking down, and it seems to you like it's deliberate.
Yeah, thank you. I feel heard, and I'm out of time.
Okay. Thanks. I guess it's my turn then.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I will invite David to listen.
Okay.
Okay. So the thing that most irritates me is that I feel that there's a lot of hidden influence that's affecting all of this. I feel that there's hidden influence behind the scenes that's affecting what's put out there on the media. I think there's hidden influence in the White House. I think there's hidden influence on both sides, on both the liberal and the conservative side, and that there's very little integrity, and that it makes it really difficult to know what's real, and that we are all being influenced. Okay, thanks.
Sorry, I can only remember so much.
No. I'm glad you did that.
Yeah. So you said that you're concerned. The thing that upsets you is you're concerned that there seems to be a lot of influence going on behind the scenes on both sides of the aisle, in the media, in the White House, everything. I'm assuming, and this is that there's an integrity problem. I don't know if you mean that it's causing an integrity problem, or it's an integrity problem because they allowed us to be this way, but that there's an integrity problem.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel heard in that, and it helps me to clarify about the integrity problem. So I feel that often when people are speaking publicly, they're not coming from a place of integrity, that there is a lot of the public speech is being designed to influence people in a particular way, and it's not coming from a place of integrity.
You've noticed that, particularly in public speech, that there's it's designed to have hidden influences, so to speak. I'm adding my own words to it. Perhaps a lot of double talk, so to speak. Saying one thing but meaning another. So it seems like there's a lack of integrity or sincerity in public speeches.
Yes, and that bothers me a lot, because I also see, and I believe that some of that one element of that is that in the media and in some public speech, especially political speech, it's specifically designed to make people angry, to get people fired up and angry. And I really feel angry about that.
Sounds like it's working. No, I'm sorry. I'm not supposed to do that. But okay, you said that there's a lot of speech that you think is specifically designed to get people worked up and angry, and that makes you angry.
Yes. I feel angry towards the divisiveness, and that I think that there's an intention to get people fired up, to get people fighting each other, to get people identifying the other side as other, and it puts us, it affects our brains. Actually, as a psych nurse, I know how that affects the brain and what that does to us.
Okay, you said this way of getting people worked up as you see it is causing a lot of divisiveness altogether, and that it actually changes your brain on a molecular level. I'm assuming you're trying to get at, and you know this as a professional in the field.
Yes, yes. That it shuts down the higher thinking centers and it shuts down the empathy centers. And I feel really sad when I think about that. Actually, I mean, right now, even I feel so much sadness about how that affects our whole culture.
And you said that that it this type of this type of speaking or getting people angry is specifically you, I'm not sure if you think it's specifically designed, but it definitely causes higher brain functions to shut down and people to partake in more of a monkey mind. Probably, I think is a term people use. The tribalistic monkey mind, a lower brain.
Yeah, I would just clarify from a science point of view, it's actually more like a lizard brain
Yeah,
than a monkey
reptilian. Yeah.
mind. Yeah. So thank you. I feel heard.
And Corey hasn't had a chance yet, so if you want to speak.
I was going to pick Corey. I was going to do it around. Corey, you there?
Hey, David. There you go.
Hey, good morning. So yeah, I picked you because no one's picked you yet, and you got to keep it refreshed. Um, hmm. Well, I've had my ups and downs in the last 2 years. It started with annoyance, and then extreme anger, and then action, and then like depression, and then action, and then revolution. I've been up and down this slide. I guess maybe a lot of people have in the past couple of years.
So you, in the past couple of years, you feel like you've been on like a roller coaster of like going from like irritation and anger to action to like depression and like maybe some more anger and like back to action again, and really like a pretty chaotic up and down of emotions in the course of the past 2 years. And you're thinking that a lot of people have had that experience too.
Okay, I feel hard. And in the past, when I was younger and a bit more nihilistic and immature, I'd be hanging out at a coffee shop or something. I'd see like the protests of the week here, like during the Bush years and stuff. They'd be like, "No war, no war," and I would just, me and my friends, we just laugh at them, and because we call them like weekend warriors. They would get out, out of their suburbs and march the streets for a weekend and said some things that made them feel nice and fuzzy and go back home. Didn't really take them very seriously.
So, in your, what do you say? You're more nihilistic and
younger, nihilistic, immature.
You'd be hanging out with your friends at a coffee shop or random place there in San Francisco, and you'd see these people that were from the suburbs, and they'd come out and they'd march around with signs and yell some chants and get their feel goods and go home, and you didn't feel like they were doing anything effective or long lasting or useful, just like making themselves feel good and like not really building or contributing anything or changing anything.
And I feel hurt. And over the past, I've lived in San Francisco. I'm from the deep South, but I've lived in San Francisco for going on like 18 years now. And I've had enough time to kind of see just how deep the cultural differences are here in perspectives and attitude. And it's kind of reaffirmed like my instincts on maybe how I was raised or maybe what I've seen and why things are the way they are. So I've decided to become more active.
So in your 18 years living in San Francisco, you feel like you've had a chance to feel out the culture at a deep level, and it's sort of confirmed some of your already held beliefs and assumptions about how things should be, and like cultural patterns that are positive or negative, and seeing you see a lot of you see a lot of the cultural makeup in San Francisco as something problematic, and it spurred you to become more active politically.
Okay. How much time do I got, Edwin? 1 minute? Oh shoot, I wasted too much time. All right. Well, there's one particular incident that happened here, and I'm going to sum it up as best I can. Patriot Prayer came here in like August of 2017, and this is like maybe 2 months after Charlottesville, and the mayor here basically said straight up, white supremacists are coming into town, which was opposite of what they were. I mean, they had like one white speaker, and the mayor wasn't even checked on this. And then Nancy Pelosi reiterated that, and it caused a huge lynch mob to form. And that was supposed to be my first rally I wanted to go to and support, because I believed in these guys. And that really twisted me up after seeing that. You know, it was straight up like fire and pitchforks. And these people had the nerve to call us bigots.
So your first rally that you went to,
I wanted to go to. I didn't go.
That you wanted to go to, that you were like, as you were starting to become more politically active, and you felt like you really believed in the mission of Patriot Prayer, and you don't feel like what Nancy Pelosi and the mayor at that time of San Francisco said about them was accurate, but you saw the way people came out and turned up, and like people showed up in a really confrontational and violent way, and you were really impacted by observing that.
Yeah, I felt hurt, and that's all I have. That's all the time I got. I guess I'll bring it back around and go ahead and speak to Edwin.
Okay. Listening.
I feel really angry. I feel angry that, like, we've talked a lot so far about like culture and systems, and like people are sort of obliquely referring to different issues with the culture, and like there's some systematic problems, and I feel kind of angry because it all feels really detached from the reality of what's happening around us.
So in what we're speaking here, you're feeling angry because what we're saying is feels detached from sort of what's really happening or what's happening around us.
Yeah, I feel sad that when I think about, like, even though I feel strongly about the necessity of groups like this, where people from different sides of the spectrum get together and talk and hear each other, I feel like it's really important. I also have this sort of double vision around it, where on one side I see like how positive it is, on the other side I see a bunch of white people getting together to talk in an abstract way about problems that are really not abstract for people that are being directly affected. Like there are like migrant children and adults in cages and cold boxes, people being denied of their human rights, and other things that are going on that are just beyond the pale. And so I feel some like fundamental disconnect between like having like sort of abstract discussions about political systems and well there's like these very real things going on for very real people.
Okay, so you're seeing that what's here is sort of abstract. It's white people talking about, kind of these abstract topics, and there's real things that are happening. For example, there's children in cages, and that's not being addressed. These real issues aren't being addressed, and you just feel sort of angry about that.
I want to be heard for like the fact that I'm seeing with like double vision. Like on one hand seeing like a lot of value in it, and on the other hand being like, wow, this is just a bunch of abstract back and forth.
So you want to if there's two kind of aspects to this. One is you see the benefits of it, and then on the other hand is the sort of the abstractness of it, and sort of having that double vision of seeing both of those, holding both of those at the same time.
Yeah, and I often find myself in that place of like, wow, yeah, I really see where you're coming from with that, and also like, wow, this is just picking at gnats because like where it's too hard to address the real issues.
Mm-hmm. So that happens to you often, or just seeing that people are sort of nitpicking, swiping at gnats and not really addressing the real issues. So it's this double vision is something that's like kind of persistent, ongoing for you.
And I feel really frustrated when people like it's become very popular on the left to sort of focus our ire on Donald Trump and his rotating cast of characters, and I like it seems kind of myopic. Like there's none or little recognition that much of this was going on before Donald Trump ever had the bright idea to run for president, and that indeed, like this legacy of horror, it goes back all the way to the founding of our country, and that makes me feel really. When I think about that, I feel really hopeless about any stability in our government because it's built on the foundation. I feel like the foundation of our governmental system is it's rooted in like ruthless exploitation, theft, slavery, and how can it ever be something that promotes fairness or equity or good things in the world when it was built on many dead bodies?
Okay, so you feel you feel some ire with the left when they point out, Trump's, the drama that's going on with him, the firing and all this drama, because you're seeing the kind of deeper issue of the whole country was based on these, I guess, unempathic way of being of, death and, murder and all slavery and all these kind of issues. And that's brought to the, to current. And Trump is just sort of revealing some of that. And that you feel some hopelessness, just saying, how can we sort of, how can that be changed when where the country is sort of built on this foundation? And that was 5 minutes too. Okay.
Thank you for hearing me.
Then I'll speak to Marky. And you're muted.
Yes.
Yeah, it's, let's see. I guess for me, the way forward is the empathy, what we're doing now. Yeah, so it's the only way forward that I see. Is like there's all this history of, horrors, and I just see empathy as the way forward.
So you really feel that this empathy is the one path that we can move forward with?
Yeah, so, the stories I heard as a child growing up, my parents were German, living in the eastern part of Germany during World War II. So when the Russians came in, it's like that, everyone in my father's family was shot. And on my mother's side, the women were raped, kind of sort of gang raped, kind of, stuff like that. And that happened kind of sort of revenge that the Russians took on the Germans for, you know, the horrors they did, you know, to them. So I kind of heard all this kind of stuff growing up, and just I've just come to see that, you know, moving forward with building a culture of empathy is the way to go, to kind of head off these horrors and kind of also address what Corey's mentioning too, that there's all these horrors that happened here in this country.
So you arose from a family where there was so much fighting that there was actually people killing each other out of this intense conflict of different groups, the Germans and the Russians, and it makes you really strongly aware that route doesn't get you anywhere. And so it seems like also you're saying that you can really feel what Corey was talking about in terms of that the soil that we grow from. You're feeling that, and it makes you even more committed and even more convinced that empathy is the only path.
Yeah, and also in terms of, you know, the group being not is, you know, diverse, per se diverse. I don't really worry about it. I'm just glad whoever shows up and wants to, you know, do this. I'm just glad for that, and, you know, just kind of start spreading the empathy, you know, the work. So for me, it's not such an issue.
So you're not feeling a need to control who's here, that for you, it's about what we're actually doing, this empathy, and you're happy for whoever comes.
Yeah. So there's that part. So for me, it's like how to be more empathically active, you know, I really, you know, I had the same experience with that same event that David was talking about, because they had a rally here, the right had a rally here in Berkeley, and I've mentioned this before. And I actually asked the leaders if they would do an empathy circle, and they said, okay, we would. And I reached out to the organizers on the left, and nobody would talk. And I was like, it kind of like blew my mind that I had sort of identified with the left, and that realizing that the left also doesn't necessarily dialogue. And so that's kind of shifted me to really seeing, you know, kind of this moving towards this empathic space, you know, not really identifying left or right, but sort of identifying empathic, I guess.
So you had a similar experience to the one that David described of you actually were trying to get empathy going and reached out to the people on the right, and they were willing. And then when you tried to engage the folks on the left, they refused, which was really surprising and eye-opening to you. And it sounds like it really strengthened your commitment to the empathy itself, understanding that the lack of empathy could happen, or the lack of willingness to participate happens on both sides. And that really surprised you.
Yeah. Well, I kind of knew it, but this kind of confirmed it.
So it was a strong confirmation of something you suspected.
And I don't want to demonize the left either. It's like, you know, it's okay. We need an empathy movement that's able to listen to both sides and to bring them together. And that's really what, you know, these empathy circles is about. Is, you know, it's like all sides really. We need to form a core of people who are, you know, kind of grounded in empathy, that can kind of listen to both sides and bring the sides together, is kind of how I see it now.
So you're really wanting people who identify more with the wanting to move forward with empathy than one side or another, people who are able to listen kind of all around in that empathic way.
Yeah, that's it. I feel heard. Thank you. That was my time too.
Okay. Okay. Let me see. There's so much that I'd really like to respond to.
Step one is select who to speak to.
I know. And part of that is figuring out which direction I want to go in terms of choosing who I am going to ask to listen. I think maybe I'll ask Corey, if you're willing to listen. be my designated listener. Thank you. Um, I'm feeling bathed in all of this. I'm so aware, both from what you said, Corey, and from what Edwin just said about the deep roots of trauma that we are all emerging from, the trauma of this country that we were founded on, and then the trauma that Edwin named in Germany, and it's all around the planet, and so I'm just really feeling that right now.
So you're feeling really, really aware of like the deep roots of trauma, like both here in the U.S. and all around the planet, and how it affects all of us to this day. Right? Did I get that?
Yes, I feel heard with that. And I'm aware that the thing that heals that actually is empathic presence. The thing that heals that is presence, which is some of what we're doing right now.
And you're aware that what heals trauma is empathic presence, which is what we're here to do.
Yeah. And I'm again thinking about what I named before about the forces that are deliberately inflaming things, and how that keeps that anger going and keeps the fighting going and keeps us out of our ability to be present with each other.
And you feel really aware of the way that inflammatory rhetoric is used on both sides to keep the back and forth fighting going and keep us from feeling more trustful and being able to interact with each other in a more meaningful way.
Yes, and what I notice as I name that is that again, I'm right now noticing kind of a dual vision about it, because I believe that on the one hand there are forces that are doing that very purposely, but I also think that some of it has to do with the way our brains are wired, and when we have unhealed trauma in us, it's biological. The reaction to threat says, okay, I'm going to see you as other, and I'm going to have to protect myself, and I got to be ready to fight or run.
So you have a kind of a double vision around the style, like this action of like using inflammatory language and like projecting those big inflammatory emotions. On the one hand, you believe that some of it is very deliberate, like people are intentionally using the tools that they have to create a culture or a space of like big, angry, inflammatory emotions. But you're also aware of like where it's not being intentionally created, where it's like people are traumatized. You're aware of like the biological realities around trauma and how unhealed trauma affects the way we function, the way we think, the way we communicate. Excuse me. And I'm getting a lot of sadness from you, like about it, like the way unhealed trauma replicates itself through this the need to like protect and be ready to fight and like protecting vulnerabilities and like attacking to create a sense of safety.
Yes. Yes, that well, I feel sadness, although the sadness isn't about that. I mean, for me, that's just a reality. It's just a biological truth. I feel sad about the ways that our lack of awareness of that and it perpetuates it and makes it worse and makes people act in ways that hurt each other. And that was my 5 minutes.
So your sadness is more about being aware that the way unhealed trauma makes us the way we react in ways that set us against each other.
It makes us act in ways that creates more trauma. Basically, it perpetuates the trauma. That's what I feel sad about.
And you feel sad because the reality of the unhealed trauma that we're all carrying is that it's in the nature of our lizard brains to perpetuate the trauma through trying to protect ourselves.
Yes, thank you. I feel heard.
I'd like to speak to Sam. Seems like you've been out of loop a little bit. Well, that's the last round.
I'm listening.
Round. I always need a few seconds, in between, Wow, yeah, trauma's real. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so you're just kind of having difficulty, with the overwhelmingness of trauma and this big topic that's come up, and needing some time and space to really absorb it and take it all in and decide where you want to go with it.
The replication of trauma is an issue in my personal life as well as in public life right now.
So you're recognizing the replication of trauma that Marky was talking about in our public life is also relevant to your personal life.
Yeah. There's
a lot of big feelings around that.
Yeah, it's really, it seems so overwhelming to contemplate the scope of unhealed trauma and its effects across the board.
Yeah, just acknowledging and considering the effects of unhealed trauma is just overwhelming and so pervasive in our world that it's overwhelming.
Yeah, last week, David and I found ourselves talking about shame and how people one of the things that has made me feel kind of alienated from a lot of people on the left is the use of turning to shame, and we were talking a little bit about how from a very young age, we're taught that shame and punishment is an acceptable way to modify someone else's behavior, and we carry that into adulthood, and we never seem to let go of it.
Yeah, and so part of that, the replication of the trauma is how shame is used to manipulate and control behavior in ways that are traumatizing for us. And that's part of what alienates you from the left a little bit, and maybe how they're utilizing those same strategies to try to get what they want or what they're concerned about.
Yeah, and like I believe that in a lot of places, like it comes from a place of good faith. Like people are trying to, like they see that harm is being done, and so they're setting themselves against what they see as harmful. But it's just not, and I understand that, and that makes sense to me. But it's just not. We're not getting anywhere, or we're like we get somewhere and then 2 or 4 years later we go back the other way because the other side has been nursing their shame, and like so we can't really make progress and then sit there. Like it's always like a back and forth because we're on this like nice little trauma swing.
Yeah, like I think what you're saying earlier on is that the methods people are using to try to combat the harm is actually causing more harm, and shame is a big part of that, and each side is triggering the shame in the other side, and that's just perpetuating this cycle of just traumatizing each other and the divisiveness and all the issues we see today.
Yeah, even though like I get it, and like it makes sense to me to push back against ideologies that are broadly harmful. It makes sense to me to like stand up against racism and discrimination and policies that do active harm to a lot of people. But I don't think we're going to get anywhere in any long-term way.
Yeah, so you're understanding why people are responding in such inflammatory ways because of the threat defense system and the traumas and all of that, but you're not seeing it go anywhere, and that's concerning.
That's my time. Thanks for hearing me.
All right, I'm going to choose David.
Okay.
Wow. I want to thank Marky for kind of just naming that, and I feel like this is the stuff that the deeper stuff that maybe Corey was trying to get at before, and feeling like how the conversation was sort of surface and abstract, but Marky's comments of just calling out the role of trauma and its impact on our behavior has really deepened the conversation.
Okay, you feel like some of the things that's been brought to the table by Marky and Corey perhaps have gotten to a more deeper root to some of these whatever we're doing here.
Yeah, and and I just feel a lot of appreciation for that, and now I kind of want to use that to reframe everything we've discussed so far. I'll stop there.
Okay, I think you said you appreciated that, and now you kind of feel like you want to reframe everything now that we've brought it to a different level.
Yeah, so the first thing I want to say is that it sounds like, there's a lot of feelings expressed of overwhelm and sadness and not sure how to move forward, and now it seems more clear that the first step is being aware of the deeper issues and calling attention to it, and the second step is that empathic witnessing and listening to heal.
Okay, it seems like you said, see here, so you think the first step to a possible solution is recognizing the deeper levels of the problem, and the second step is participating in empathic listening.
Yeah, and to address maybe your comments earlier, David, about like your experience with Patriot Prayer and how others had responded to you, you know, it seems like the fundamental trauma there is of like kind of not being heard, or being your values being, your opinions being shoved aside and not seen as valid. And that's a trauma, kind of, in a way. It can deeply affect people when they feel invalidated. Is kind of
hold up, you know. Okay. You said I thought I had you for a second, then I kind of lost you at the end. That you heard my story about my experience with the Patriot Prayer Rally, and you can realize how that can be upsetting to have my opinion kind of shoved aside.
Yeah, and I see that, you know, in this conversation of trauma, like the trauma that's experienced on your side is the trauma of not being heard and being shoved aside. But then the other side, there's a trauma of the ideas being expressed triggering the threat defense system in a way that creates that shutting down response. I might need to rephrase that.
Could you?
Yeah. So I'm seeing the role of trauma in creating the reaction on the other side of the shutting down reaction on the other side. I'm seeing the role of trauma in creating that reaction. And I'll elaborate more after.
You said that trauma is causing one side to shut down, and that it's, and I lost you after that.
Okay, so I think some of the ideas being expressed with some folks affiliated with Patriot Prayer is triggering a trauma response in others who feel the need to shut it down because they think it's dangerous.
Okay. Thanks for being a bit more direct and specific. It helps. You said some of the things that Patriot Prayer perhaps said triggers trauma, or perhaps a sense of danger from another side, and they want to shut it down.
Right. And so if we acknowledge, well, what is it about what Patriot Prayer is saying that's triggering these traumas, and kind of be more empathic to listening to that, even though they're trying to shut it down, rather than responding in kind, I think is like how to break the cycle is what I'm trying to say.
You think it's important to try to figure out a way to break the cycle of people maybe presenting things, provocative subject matter, and people wanting to shut them down directly without responding to them in kind?
Well, just to clarify, like, it's the free speech stuff where, you know, people are sharing provocative things. They have the right to share that, but it's triggering real deep traumas in other people that want to shut it down. And then because of shutting it down, that makes it more inflamed. And so, like, I just want to, how do we break that cycle?
You want to figure out how to break the cycle of people coming in public sphere with provocative message, perhaps to some, and then people responding in kind of shutting it down, and that, in fact, inflames the other side even more, and the cycle repeats. You want to know how to shut that down, how to maybe fix that or whatever.
Yeah, not necessarily shut that down, but like, yeah, how to break that cycle. So yeah, thank you. I feel heard.
Okay. Sorry if I get a little facial expressions. Sometimes people say things that I really just want to jump in, but I can't. I really got to bite my tongue. But I'll pick Edwin. There's a lot of stuff I want to respond to. Um, I can't do it. Just it's best not to do it directly. So I'm just going to use you, in spirit rotation.
So there's a lot of things you really want to say, and you're not going to speak directly maybe to the person, but speak to me to kind of express it.
Okay, I wanted to say first of all, I've noticed the racial disparity, so to speak, in these things, and I thought about it. What? If you know some black people, some Asians, or whatever, they're more welcome to come here. If not, it's not my problem.
Yeah, so you're speaking about the racial diversity here, and it's you're saying that, hey, if you want black or other races to be here, invite them. It's not your problem to invite them.
Okay, and I think some people might assume that speaking maybe obtusely and not pacifically and in a structured manner means that they have not suffered trauma in their life. And that is opposite to the point. I mean, I don't know if you see this scar right here. I've had my face busted open by crackhead. I lived on the streets. I was an IV drug user. I've seen hell, but just responding like an animal just because things are very real, quote unquote real, does not make the problem any better.
Mm-hmm. So you've had trauma as well, and that sort of responding to something that's real is I wasn't quite clear on that, but there's something about the responding to realness.
That just responding in a structured, civilized manner does not mean that you do not live in a very real world.
So having this structured dialogue and being structured doesn't mean that it's not real, that it's real.
Yeah. And I think I've noticed this general attitude on, especially the far left, of especially white people judging other white people. Are you don't even have you don't even you're out of your lane to be talking about anything, because you're not oppressed, you don't suffer. And that is first of all, it's not the point. Opinions are opinions, but there's plenty of people who do suffer. And I've seen generally at the rallies, our crowd on the conservative side is generally more diverse than the Antifa crowd, which is mainly a bunch of white boys.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of diversity, when you're at these rallies, you're seeing the right being more diverse versus Antifa, which is more white males.
Yes.
And
and also that people that seem to have this general sense that our government is generally corrupt. That's the nature of power. I mean, people do what they can to get what they want. I don't believe in altruism. I do believe the best a person can be is to get what they need and try to be a decent person along the way. That's the best you can hope for. This over-the-top selflessness doesn't exist, and it distorts the truth and reality.
So the nature of power is that it's sort of corrupt and that it's not an altruistic endeavor, and to think of it being altruistic is maybe naive or just doesn't match reality.
Yes. And there's a lot of feelings and old memories get brought up in speeches and stuff, and the way history has been taught and stuff, this nation is founded on slavery and oppression and stuff. And a lot of that's true, but white people are not the only evil people on this planet. This is a brutal planet we live in, and that was a very brutal time in history. During the creation of our country, the whole world was ruthless.
So you're wanting to say it's not just white people that are ruthless, but it's really sort of humanity in general. It has it's a general ruthlessness.
Yes,
I feel for that.
I feel like also that a lot of the. How much time do I have?
That's about 30 seconds.
I want to close it on something. I think that we've reached a decadent time in our history right now, and people are just admitting things to get pissed off about at this point, and it's not going to stop till the real suffering stops, till we really enter another Great Depression. And I think that in a lot of ways, people are born to suffer. That if we're not suffering, we will invent ways to suffer if we don't know better. And if we are content, we'll invent ways of not being content. It's the one way you feel alive. It's part of human nature.
Mm-hmm. So that we're sort of born to suffer, and that we feel alive when we're suffering. So if we're not suffering, that we'll probably create ways to suffer, and we're sort of in this decadent era right now. And it'll only change if people kind of have sort of a depression, Great Depression or something, to really come back to their core selves or something like that.
Yeah, I pretty much feel heard. Thank you.
Okay. Then I'll speak to Corey. Yeah, so, kind of wondering what to say, not quite sure what words I've been taking in a lot. Oh, I had something written down. I guess, for me, one thing is I wonder what to do when the left will not dialogue. Because I've been seeing that a lot with that example, where I invited the left to speak and they wouldn't talk. And I'd also interviewed James Damore, who had done the Google memo, which was talking about the difference between male and female biology. And then we tried to get feminists to speak with him, and they said, we don't want to give him attention, so we don't want to speak to him. So there's this whole thing on the left of not wanting to dialogue for various reasons. I mean, part of the left. So I'm just wondering how to address that.
So you're kind of like a constant question is you're sort of wondering how to get the left, as it were, to address to talk to.
Yeah.
You're really frustrated by the left, or certain factions of the left, like being unwilling to listen to those who are diametrically opposed.
Yeah, just to dialogue. Yeah, listen and dialogue. Yeah. And it's
really frustrated about this.
Yeah, it's frustrated and curious, and it's challenge. It's a challenge how to address this, because it kind of the extremes is Antifa, right? So Antifa, it's like they're masked. You go up there, you try to dialogue to them, and it's like this wall, And so there's kind of that aspect. And then when we have an empathy circle, we have sort of Antifa members coming and trying to shut it down in the empathy tent. So it's not only not talking, but trying to shut down the dialogue. So it's it's this whole thing of this block to empathy of just not engaging in dialogue. It's kind of sad, actually. I feel some sadness around that.
So you feel sadness around, like, not only like you're seeing, like, not only are people unwilling to dialogue, they actually are taking the extra step of wanting to shut down any attempt at dialogue. And you're really trying to build a reality in which people talk and listen to each other, and it's really frustrating and painful to you to see, like, to be dealing with this challenge of, like, trying to get people to talk to each other and is under these conditions.
Yeah, and it's like from Antifa sort of at the extremes, and it sort of spreads throughout the left movement to varying degrees, like, feminists not wanting to talk to James Damore, the counter demonstrators not willing in Berkeley, like there's like 30 groups not willing to dialogue, even the churches willing to dialogue with the right. And so it kind of this value of shutting down dialogue kind of spreads through to varying degrees and different strategies through the left. And how to address that is sort of a challenge, because it's like this wall, right? If people say, I'm not going to talk to you, that's like shutting down. That's one of the blocks to empathy. Like, we're just not engaging.
So, yeah, you're seeing this this wall of they're shutting down, not wanting to engage, not wanting to not being willing to open up the floor or talk or listen to people in opposing positions at all. I feel like I might have missed something.
No, that's it. And there's two threads on the left. There's we have, there's four of us, we're more or less on the left, and we're willing to talk. So there's sort of this thread of these two energies within the left. So it's not monolithic. It's just one aspect, within that. So it's just, how to, it's a challenge. And I have a lot more, but my time is up.
You're really kind of engrossed in this challenge of dealing with these two threads on the left of one of being willing to open up dialogue and talk and find solutions and things like that, and the other thread of sort of stonewalling and not being willing to discuss it all. And you're really you find it to be a real challenge to try to build empathy in this, with these two threads happening, but you have a lot of you feel really activated about it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, I feel heard. Thank you.
Yeah, would like to talk to David.
Okay.
And I think I really wanted to point up and this kind of goes along with what Edwin was saying about the feminists not wanting to talk to what's his face, whatever his face.
The Google guy.
James Damore.
James Damore. And I guess I really want to point to the need for safety, and people really feel if they open up dialogue or give allow for an open conversation between with these people that they see as the enemy, they feel their safety and the safety of people they care about will be compromised.
Okay. You feel that there's a concern for safety for people to talk to their ideological enemies in a lot of situations, and you think that's a factor in them not wanting to talk to them.
Yeah, I think I feel heard. I think that there's there's an idea that giving the enemy voice time increases their capability to cause harm.
Okay, there's a concern that giving someone voice time or a platform would I forgot the last part, would be bad for them.
Basically.
Yeah.
And And like on one level, what you said about like being a culture of decadence and people like not really understanding what danger is, what danger or deprivation really is. Like, I feel like on one level I understand that and it makes sense. But they're, go ahead, I'll stop there.
Okay. You do agree, or you resonate with that when I said that we're living in a culture of decadence at the moment, and that people might not be truly aware of how dangerous the world is.
Yeah, somewhat. But I also at the same time, I think that is speaking in broad terms here, like your side doesn't recognize the consequences, the personal consequences of trauma. They don't recognize. I feel like a lot of people on the right, like they sort of mock the idea of trauma, of triggers, of like they mock like they don't really understand like that psychological safety can be a really important need.
Okay, you said that a lot of people on my side, you were immediately generalizing that we don't recognize or appreciate trauma and how deeply it can affect people and how much of a need that really is for people to be able to deal with it or not have to receive it, so to speak. I'm putting in words, but I think it's a general jest.
Yeah, I think I feel heard. And I think I can stop there too. Thank you for hearing me.
No problem. Okay, who to speak with? How about Marky? Have I spoke with you yet? I don't even remember.
I don't think so. You listened, but you haven't spoken.
Okay, I hear a lot of people talk about trauma, and I guess that is a root thing. Like trauma and fear are like, that's very reptilian.
So you're hearing all this discussion about trauma, and you're recognizing that trauma and fear is very reptilian, and that it's real.
And I like to say that what's the best way of putting this? Just because some of us don't respond to people complaining about trauma doesn't mean that we don't feel it ourselves, but that we feel that it is something that to be overcome, not magnified.
So just because someone doesn't respond to others talking about trauma doesn't mean that they haven't themselves experienced it, and that that you feel that trauma is something to be overcome and not magnified.
Mm-hmm. And I'd like to say that I recognize the need to, like, what's the best way of putting this? There's a saying that hurt people, and I think there's a lot of bitterness in the world of those who've been hurt, and that causes them to want to hurt those who have not been hurt yet, just so they can feel what they feel, and it repeats a cycle over and over again.
So you're also aware of that saying about hurt people, and that you see that as a dynamic where sometimes people who have been hurt, they want to lash out so others know how it feels. They want to pass it on.
Yes. And I think that's one way of empathizing with someone, maybe that's destructive side. I think there's a destructive side to anything, and that might be the warps maybe like some warp empathy right there. It's just actually literally feeling what the person feels or making like forced empathy.
So in a way, you feel like that action of harming when you have been hurt and you harm others, that could be, in a way, an attempt to get empathy, to force empathy on this other person, to kind of say, here, this is how it feels.
Yes. And so not I feel like anything can be turned into a bad thing. You can overdo anything. And I got so much to say about go blank. Anything can be a bad thing. You can overdo it. And I think maybe a lot of things that start out with good intentions, especially with the left, from what I observe, can turn into like recognizing problems, but it quickly turns into the oppression Olympics, and it gets ridiculous.
So there was a word that I missed, but you said that you think that good things can be overdone, and it sounds like you were saying the left might take some things too far in this whole question of trauma. And I'm not sure if you said depression Olympics. Was that the word?
Oppression Olympics.
Oh, oppression. That you see how things can get so magnified that it becomes almost like the oppression Olympics.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's some people, because first of all, I'm white, I'm male, I'm straight. Even worse, I'm from the South. I don't fit into San Francisco from the get-go. People assume I'm racist and stupid, and there might be some truth to some of that, but not any, no one's perfect. And I think everyone's a little racist in a certain extent. It's like it's like being afraid of something once in your life, and then all of a sudden you're fierce for the rest of your life. It's very, it's things. There's a lot. We all have things that we're not proud of that are completely natural to feel.
So you see how things can get magnified, how fear can get magnified. Also, I wanna name that this thing about in the oppression Olympics, you're in one down categories in like 4 out of 5 or whatever, because of being white and male and heterosexual and from the South. And also that people make assumptions about you based on that first of all, that people are making assumptions about you based on that. They assume that you're racist and bigoted and stupid. And also, there's a way that you want to say that there are some human things about possibly being racist that kind of are maybe in all of us, and that it doesn't have to be hidden and negated. Is that?
For the most part, I feel heard.
Okay.
And my time is up.
Okay.
This will be the last. You'll be the last speaker. Until we join the other group.
Okay, great. I guess I'll name Edwin.
Okay.
And I'm gonna actually respond to your invitation earlier about naming or speaking a little bit to the whole Christine Ford Kavanaugh thing, because I think there are some threads that we've been talking about that actually are pertinent to that.
So going back to the Christine, the Kavanaugh and Ford topic, is some of what we talked about relates to that.
Yes. And I think that the question of trauma and another word that's really charged of privilege really shows up in that whole dynamic between Dr. Ford and Justice Kavanaugh.
And the topic of privilege and trauma show up there in that exchange.
Yes. And that Dr. Ford spoke up and decided to come forward about her experience because she felt it was really important to protect the country based on a trauma that she had experienced at the hands of Mr. Kavanaugh.
And her motivation for coming forward was to sort of protect the country, or to share a trauma she'd had with him, in a way to kind of share that and protect the country too.
And she put herself at great risk in order to do so.
And in doing that, she would put herself at risk too.
And the risk that she took has actually borne out in terms of death threats and not being able to return to her home, and there's been a lot of violence directed towards her.
Mm-hmm. So she put herself at risk in that, and it's actually been shown that she was at risk, because there's been death threats and other things too that actually happened.
And while I would like to think that an empathy circle regarding that experience that she had would have been helpful, I don't think it would have.
So if she would have had an empathy circle with them, with the Kavanaugh, you don't think it really would have been helpful to do this?
I think that if you subtract the whole question of him being nominated to the Supreme Court and it were a personal thing, then I absolutely think an empathy circle would have been helpful. Mm. But under the circumstances, I think I don't think it would have helped.
Mm. So if it was just him and her and him having, kind of working out this issue together, that could have worked. But in this larger context of being a Supreme Court nominee, that within this context, you don't think empathy circle would have worked.
Right. And I think that I feel sad about this, but I think that there were too many layers of power, of people trying to play out what they wanted to do for that to be something that would help.
Mm-hmm. That there's all these different layers of power, and for a circle to have happened within those different layers of power, and everybody's wanting different things, that it just would not really have been worked.
And I think for a genuine empathy circle, we need to be able to be really present and honest with what's happening in the moment inside of us, and really listening to ourselves and each other. And I think within those layers, those power dynamics, I don't think that would happen.
Mm-hmm. With all these different power dynamics, it's like gets people into their positions and so forth, instead of being really attuned to the present experience, which for an empathy circle to work, people need to connect with what's happening to them in the moment.
Yes. And the other thing I want to say is that I really appreciate this opportunity to be listening here with all of you, and to I'm happily surprised at what arose.
Mm-hmm. So having some gratitude for this opportunity, and some surprise at kind of the things that came up.
Yeah, and I feel like I heard, I deeply heard something from each person here, and I value that.
Mm-hmm. So you heard something from everyone here, some deep things from everyone, and you're valuing that. And
yeah.
That was 5 minutes too.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, so there's always more to say, and every week we have another empathy circle. So this, there's plenty more, to do next week. So we're going to go back to the main room, and then we're going to do a debrief. So thanks everyone for taking part in this. I also really appreciated it too. Got a lot out of it.
Thanks.
Let's see, return, stop, breakout rooms. How do we close all rooms? There we go.
Looks like the other group isn't done yet.
Yeah, they get 1 minute. There's sort of a 1 minute warning. So they.
All here.
Are they? Let me stop the I think they all should be coming back. Oh, here they come.
Pop, pop.